Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and Happy New Year. I hope that you will take some time this year to really take care of yourself and find your path in HR or Voc Rehab, whatever your career of choice is. As these things keep changing and getting more complex, I think our ability to really breathe and understand the situation before we respond is half the battle in really helping employees understand how we can assist them in finding ways to be accommodated and perform the functions of their job. Today, I'm doing something a little different. I have a scenario, but then a list of questions that we often get asked when we're doing presentations and these podcasts. And I thought I would just slowly go through these different issues and give you an update on strategies to approach how to handle the challenges associated with accommodations. So Mark is a software developer at a mid-sized tech company, and he informed his supervisor that he has a medical condition affecting his mobility and his fine motor skills. This is making it challenging for him to type for extended periods and to attend in-person team meetings without significant discomfort. He's provided medical certification from his healthcare provider recommending the accommodations, but it's not giving the detail that the employer wants in terms of why. The employer has initiated the ADA interactive process to explore how they can support Mark while ensuring he can meet the expectations of performing all the essential functions of the job. So the first question is, what should they do before the Good Faith Interactive meeting? Well, they already have the medical certificate, but they have some questions. So this would have been an opportunity to cure the medical certificate and ask Mark to get additional clarification if there were specific concerns about how long is he able to interact with his computer equipment. Is there a specific computer equipment? Those are things that you could clarify prior to the meeting, either by looking it up yourself on Ask Jan and identifying some opportunities, or asking Mark to go ahead and look at Ask Jan and to see if he wants to bring some ideas to the meeting that he's potentially reviewed with his medical provider. We also make sure that there's a witness at the meetings and somebody to document the conversation. Now, how do you clarify the essential functions of Mark's job and prepare for introducing the job description during that Good Faith Interactive meeting? Well, let's make sure that your job description clarifies the functionality that matches Mark's disability. So, for example, he's got software and hardware challenges, and so does the job description discuss the degree to which he has to interact with a computer keyboard? How many often per day? Is it constant? Is it occasional? My guess is it's probably constant. Those are the things that we're looking for in the job description. Does it have an amended piece to it if we've got mental challenges that need accommodation? Is it discussing those details? And if it doesn't, go to ONET and find a comparable job description and see if you can get clarification on strategies to discuss how he performs the functions of the job. So we start by identifying what are those essential functions, and then how does he actually perform them? How does he get them done? What machines, tools, or work aids does he interact with to perform those functions? That's what we accommodate on, everybody, is how you perform the essential functions of the job. We don't remove the essential function. We remove or mitigate the method in which you implement it or perform it and see if we can accommodate that process. That's why the functions or the description of the job could be very high level, but until you identify the tasks that are implemented to get that job done, and then how do you actually implement those tasks, we're not getting at the real accommodation challenge. Now, what questions should your employer ask Mark to understand his limitation and needs? Mark, how does your disability impact your ability to perform function 1, to use a keyboard to program, for example? And then we're going to start looking at ONET to see what other equipment we could use to mitigate whatever that challenge is. How can you determine whether the medical information provided is sufficient or requires clarification? Well, we started by saying they didn't quite have enough information. But the question is, what are you looking for? We don't want to dig into that disability, everybody. We want to understand how the disability impacts the ability to perform the essential functions. Now, let's talk about stress for a minute. Stress by itself is not a disability. Post-traumatic stress disorder might be, anxiety disorder might be, but just having stress because I'm having a hard time doing my job by itself is not going to be a disability unless it's diagnosed under the ADA. How much of that diagnosis do you need? Just enough to understand it's a disability. And then for the employee to understand that they need to determine how that disability impacts their ability and limits their ability to perform their essential functions. And how can we mitigate that? We don't have enough medical information to discuss how their disability impacts their ability. We're not just relying on the employee's representation of that. We need medical documentation that is objective, that clarifies. And we can get that by curing. I use the same methodology that we use under FEMLA. Now, what are some potential accommodations that might help, Mark? Speech to text software, lots and lots and lots and lots of ergonomic tools on how to not use your hands when you're interacting with a computer. And of course, we can always potentially do Zoom call-in for meetings unless there's a mandatory issue for them attending in person. Why can't they accommodate them by attending via Zoom? That would be the question. Where are the meetings? Are they out of state? Do they have to drive to a new location? All those things would be impacted by the disability. Now, how can the employer assess whether these accommodations are reasonable or pose an undue hardship? And this is the real objective part of your job. If the supervisor is saying, even with the recommended accommodations, they're not meeting the expectations of the job, they're not a qualified individual with a disability. It has nothing to do with an undue hardship. But if the request itself is unreasonable on its face, would you please spend $50,000 building me a separate office that has its own air conditioning system because I have a problem with odors? Would potentially be unreasonable on its face. Or would cause an undue hardship what they're requesting because they need us to buy equipment that is $25,000. Or we are reorganizing the work environment or the manufacturing environment or the warehouse environment for the equipment, and it is unreasonable and an undue hardship on the organization to impact all the other operations that are impacted by implementing that accommodation. So there are very specific reasons why things are an undue hardship. You need to understand what those are. Of course, we've got plenty of tools and resources for you to understand that. We've got a specific training on that issue. So you know how to document objectively if you believe the accommodation is an undue hardship or unreasonable. Now, how should you document that process to assure compliance with the ADA? Very, very carefully, the same way with every interactive process, and objective data only, not your opinion about it unless your opinion is supported by other objective data or experience that you document. So we really are writing down the primary statements that are made during these meetings, and we never let the employee walk out of that meeting, get off of Zoom without signing that document that they agree that what we recorded is accurate and it accurately reflects what they said. But what we never do is let them go home with that, or you'll end up with a 4-page document and have to do a meeting all over again to go through step by step what they presented in that document. Now, what steps should HR take if the initial accommodations are ineffective and he's not performing at a meets expectation level, or his condition changes and he needs additional accommodations? Well, we really recommend that you meet with the supervisor and the employee separately every week for the first month to verify, is there anything impacting your ability to perform the functions of your job? And make sure you pay attention to those answers, because there are underlying discrimination, harassment, and retaliation issues that you're looking for from the employee. And from the supervisor, you're finding out, are they performing the functions? If they're not meeting the expectations of the job at a basic level that meets the requirements to perform that function effectively, they're not a qualified individual with a disability, or the accommodation is ineffective. So we go back to the drawing board. everybody, and I highly suggest that you do that at least 3 times to document the ineffectiveness of the accommodation and why you couldn't accommodate in their regular job. And then, of course, you look at any other job you have available that they would qualify for with their assistance to see if you could accommodate them in any other job. And then you're looking at potential termination because you aren't able to accommodate, and you don't keep people on leave indefinitely whether they figure out whether their medical condition will change or not. Now, how could a Voc Rehab consultant assist in analyzing Mark's job functions and identifying effective accommodation? Well, that is the role, everybody, that a Voc Rehab consultant or expert has been trained in. That's what their master's degree helps them with. How does that disability impact the ability to and the national economy? They're all over your counties in Health and Human Services, and there's plenty of independent consultants out there. They're very reasonable in price, and they know what they're doing. But we need to make sure, well, they know how to identify accommodations for disabilities, but they're not necessarily trained in the ADA interactive process. And a Voc Rehab counselor is very different than a Voc Rehab consultant, and you need to be careful they're not crossing the line between workers' comp and ADA in terms of over providing accommodations that really would be considered unreasonable and are changing the nature of the job. So the accommodations are for the existing essential functions. We do not modify jobs. We do not modify functions. We modify the way you perform those functions. We do not provide light duty. We do not provide modified duty. Those are not ADA accommodations. Those are return to work strategies that run concurrent potentially with the beginning of a good faith interactive meeting once they've bounced out of that return to work arena or return to work classification. And there's very strict and very serious strategies for implementing these return to work strategies without finding yourself afoul of the ADA or FEMLA. Now, what role can they play in bridging the communication between HR and Mark's healthcare provider? They are very, very versed in talking to medical providers, but we don't allow that without a HIPAA release. And if we offer it to one, we offer it to everybody. And we do this when the employee cannot get from the healthcare provider the information we need, or we can't understand why it's taking so long and we keep extending the deadline. They can really help with that. They're good, excellent case managers. So reach out to Voc Rehab consultants, especially if they've been trained by us, and make sure you understand some of these really nuanced strategies to effectively identifying accommodations in the workplace, confirming they are effective in meeting the expectations of the job, and removing people from jobs that they are not able to be a qualified individual with a disability performing at a meets expectations level with that essential function accommodation. Thanks, everybody. Let us know what other questions you have and the kind of help you're looking for. We're here to be a resource to you and to make sure that you can get the help that you needed.